Alright, here's where I stored the interstate battery that came with the RV. Probably not the best bet to store a battery in a garage up in the Minnesota winter. So probably we'll pick up a new one during the off season. We'll see about practicing battery maintenance. Hey folks, at the end of last season I did a video on just some of the things that we wish we had on our rig. For this video I had looked into a bit more on a couple of things, and these are things that I would say are probably some of the more important ones. First is I looked into getting a 12-volt refrigerator. And also I looked into potentially getting a lithium-ion battery rather than continuing to use lead acid. Long story short, both of those became really cost prohibitive, and also they got a bit more complex. The thing that I got caught up on for both of these as I looked into them is whether or not if it's really worth the money when we are part-time RVers and not full-time like a lot of the YouTube channels are. So I had a compromise, and part of this video will be talking about those compromises and talking through a couple of things that I found that may help us get better at the fridge portion of RV travel, and then also the battery portion of having an RV. So let's talk the RV refrigerator first. The idea behind getting a 12-volt RV refrigerator is most directly related to making sure that our food doesn't go to waste when we're on the road. Throughout our travels last year, we've always turned the refrigerator off on travel days. I know there's the option of always having the propane on and having the refrigerator run on propane, but for us, we elected not to do that. Our travel days last year basically were around like 6 to 8 hours. There were a couple times where it went longer, but really we try to keep it to around 6 to 8 hours. And usually at the end of those travel days, when we got to an RV park and we plugged in and I go to check the fridge, you know, things are they're not warm, but you could tell that, you know, they are starting to get to room temperature. So we realized that we can't really go too much longer, because then things start getting warmer and then all of a sudden you have things that spoil. So that's where the thought of getting a 12-volt refrigerator, we could run it while we're traveling and not be worried about any potential dangers. So I did some research, also looked at 12-volt refrigerators, and it feels like it's just going to be cost prohibitive. And I don't have actual numbers, but to start, a 12-volt refrigerator costs probably, right now, you can find cheaper ones for, I've seen around $900, but you know, let's call it $1,000, $1,100. And then you think about the amount of effort that it would take. So I found a video on YouTube where someone actually was able to kind of change out their old refrigerator to a 12-volt refrigerator, and the process they had to go through. One of the things that they got caught up on was that because the way RVs are built, they're built from the floor up, right? So they place the floor down, then they place the cabinetry, and then they end up finishing the frame after. What happened in this video was he figured out that the frame was too small or not wide enough for the refrigerator to get through the one that he had to take out. So he had to actually remove the structural pieces of the door, and then actually the door itself, to even replace the refrigerator, take the old one out and put the 12-volt in. Anyway, he was able to do this, but you know, I don't know if I want to sacrifice the integrity of other parts of the RV to actually do it. Maybe if the RV is getting older, then I don't really care. But you know, our trailer is still 1 year old. I know I'm probably not handy enough to be able to take that on myself. So that was a bit of a roadblock for me. The other option was to call up the dealership and then see if they could do it for you. they will probably have to go through the same process that I just mentioned, except I won't have to do it and I won't have to see it, but then it'll come back to me at cost, right? So I'm spending $1,100-$1,200 on a fridge, and then whatever service cost that it would incur for them to actually replace the fridge for me. I haven't checked it. I can imagine it's probably another $1,000 or two. So at the end of the day, we're looking at a few $1,000s worth of investment, a manual labor investment, and then potentially if somehow you damage your RVs anywhere else, like that also takes into account. So net couldn't really pull the trigger on the 12-volt refrigerator idea. After doing a bit more exploring and seeing what alternatives are, I decided to get 2 RV refrigerator fans. The idea would be that these fans will help circulate the air inside the RV refrigerator when I have it turned off while we're on travel days. I would get one for the refrigerator side, and then I would get one for the freezer side, because we typically have stuff in the freezer too. So that's the fridge front. The second piece is a battery situation. So there's a lot of videos out there of people doing like massive installs of like lithium-ion battery banks, and then a charge controller. You have your solar panels up on the roof, and they're like, we could live out in the wild for about a month at a time. But they don't really typically talk about the amount of investment that it might take. First of all, if you look at any lithium iron phosphate battery out there, they range from like 600 to the Battleborns, which seem to be like the zenith right now, and those are like $1,000 per battery. So folks are investing, like they're getting 3-4 battery banks, and you do the math in your head, it's already $4,000. And then they go, I want solar panels. Okay, so you install solar panels, that's another few $1,000s. And then you need a charge controller, that's another few $100s. All of a sudden you're looking at high 4, if you're aggressive enough, low 5-figure investment into this. If you are a full-time RVer, that definitely makes sense. If I am taking 5 or 6 trips a year, the return on that ends up not being there for a long time, and I may not ever get that money back. That became another thing where I was just like, well, probably could throw that idea out because of the way that we're going to be traveling in the foreseeable future. So I turned to my portable generator, my EcoFlow Delta that I got last year. For the most part, we didn't have to use it last year because we were staying at RV parks all the time. Right now, I think where the EcoFlow will come into play is if we're planning longer trips, because that's what we're doing. Less trips, but longer ones. In order to save some money, we'll probably stay at a Cracker Barrel, we'll probably stay at a truck stop, and be able to use that to power everything except our fridge. The catch is that with the AC and during the summer, we'll have to check the temperature, right? If it's too warm, then we probably prefer to be at an RV park where we can run AC and stay cool. However, as we get towards the fall, like September, October, when we could run the heat off the propane, but then run everything else through the generator, that's where it becomes really handy. So those are 2 things. The one accessory that I got is another master lock, and this one is the Python. And what it will help us do, it's a rare like outdoor equipment lock with a key, and so if we're stopped over someplace overnight and I could set up the generator, I could use the Python to lock it so that people won't try to walk away with it, and we'll see how it works. So that's the plan. I'm probably gonna find a moment to really test it out, even if we're at a certain RV park, just to see about how much power it could actually supply. So the Master Lock Python is the accessory that I got that'll help us become a bit more energy independent, especially when we're on like multiple travel days and when we have a stopover somewhere rather than staying at an RV park. Anyway, that was a quick update into the 2 things that I looked into. Again, both the refrigerator and getting a lithium-ion battery. You start to think about the investment that's there and whether or not you know, it fits in with the way that we're using our travel trailers. So for us, at the very least, for the immediate future, we're probably not going down that road. But I am really curious about how the fridge fans work, and then obviously the Python and the EcoFlow Delta, how that works this season, and I'll be sure to give you guys an update as we try them out. So that's it, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.